I feel like I lived on ramen noodles and marshmallows from like the third grade to till I was 45 years old. I don't know. Good morning. I'm Patty, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about a subject that I think about a lot. So let's get down to it. So what I want to talk about is the body positivity movement, the health at any size protocol or way of eating or attitude, I don't even know the right word, and intuitive eating and veganism and keto and all of those things. So this is going to take a lot of days to cover, so it's not like I'm going to cover everything today. Just as a quick overview, I am 47 years old and I have been what would be termed overweight by the medical establishment since, and I'm really hesitant about using that phrase because I am learning about how triggering it can be, but I have weighed more than other people my age and height and everything for a long time. I don't think, from what I remember, when I was a little kid, I had a really unusual childhood, very active childhood. When I was really little, my mother always worked, my dad stayed home. When I was really little, we went out. I'm from northern Minnesota, and there's a recreation area in the northern part of the state that you can only go into. It's non-motorized. It's like camping and canoeing and stuff like that. It's called the Boundary Waters. And I spent the summers in the Boundary Waters with my dad. He stopped drinking when I was 5, and I got a lot of my obsessive project interest way of being from my dad, for sure. And so when he stopped drinking, he really got into, it was probably 1980, 1979 when he stopped drinking. And at that time, the back to earth movement of the 70s still had a lot of sway. There's a lot of back to earth survivalists, sort of the post-hippie era, pre-80s materialism. My dad, I think, was really influenced by that. He was kind of a grumpy guy who put up with this little kid tagging along with him. And my mom and dad took this to pretty big extremes. When I was 6, we moved out into the woods with no electricity to a farmhouse in northern Minnesota where it's very cold. And my dad started racing sled dogs. So we had like 40 dogs. I spent all my time outside with him. And I think my dad, he was tall and skinny, and I think that he probably had a more healthy way of eating than my mother did. My mother and my whole family on my mom's side, lots of people are heavier, lots of diabetes, just lots of issues. My mom has a lot of heart and stroke issues and stuff like that. So I think my dad died when I was 8. I went from being outside all the time to being inside. I remember that first winter, he died in November, and I remember that first winter, we had a TV, and it was freaking cold, and I didn't know anybody in town, and I was used to being out in the farm and having all the dogs and a very different life. Also, the first year that he died, my school went to a 4-day school week to conserve on energy costs, I believe, but we had a really long school day. It was like from 8 to 4 or something like that. And then over Christmas, we got almost a month off. So imagine this, I'm 8 years old, my dad dies, I'm in the house by myself, nothing to do but a TV. And then like a month later, I got a whole month off of school, and all I did was watch soap operas, basically. Also, my mom was working, and I had a babysitter, but she was really mean. Like, she locked me in the bathroom a lot. I know this sounds like super dramatic. It doesn't feel dramatic to me. It was just, circumstances. I feel like I lived on ramen noodles and marshmallows from like, dad died when I was in the 3rd grade, I think. So from like the 3rd grade to, I don't know, till I was 45 years old. I don't know. Because it was the food I could eat myself, like make myself. I was little. I didn't know how to cook. So I started gaining weight then. Fast forward to getting into my 20s, and actually fast forward to high school. My mom is more of a, she was born in 1950. I was born in 1974. My mom is diabetic and has been since she was like 30 years old. Since I was like 5, I think, when she was diagnosed. So my mom, she didn't like vegetables that much. And I freaking love vegetables. If you know me, you know I live on vegetables. They're my favorite thing to eat. Raw, cooked, whatever. I love vegetables. And I've always had a really hard time with eating meat, like an ethical hard time. I am not a vegetarian or vegan, but I'm awful close, and it almost feels like I can't help myself. Like I am literally turned off by most meat. So anyway, I discovered vegetables in stir frying when I was in high school, and I started to go grocery shopping myself and getting vegetables and learning how to cook them because my mom was more of a canned vegetable person. You know, I didn't even know how to prepare healthy food. I figured a lot of it out, but I have always been very prone to extremes, you know, so it's like, oh, now I know about vegetables, that's all I'm gonna eat. Now I'm prone to extremes, and I'm prone to Last Supper thinking. I've been following a YouTuber and learning a lot from her. Her name is, I think her channel is Abby's Kitchen. I'll link it down below because she's awesome and balanced, and I love her. Anyway, this just started a long, fraught with difficulty experience that I had about my body and my size. So I'm 5'10". Even when I was little, young, elementary school, I was taller than the boys in my class. So I always felt like really big. Like if you're my age, you might, and you're tall and you're a woman, you might remember the difficulty in finding pants that were long enough. Like I have a really weird thing about exposed ankles because I grew up not having, I didn't have any clothes that fit me well that I liked. That's why I'm such a clothes obsessed person now, because I just didn't have a lot of the options have changed so much for women who wear over a size 16 in the last 25 years. It's insane. Like when I was in high school, when I was in high school, I could fit on the upper range. I was probably like a size 16. So I could fit on the upper range of most brands, but it was tight and not always flattering, and there wasn't always options, and it was just really, it just created a lot of discomfort for me, especially because that's something I'm hyper interested in, and color and expressing myself through clothes. And I was really like that in high school. A lot of thrift shopping. It was the 90s, a lot of combat boots, dresses. I idolized Ducky from Pretty in Pink, and Molly and Ringwald, although what she did to that prom dress, I still can't get over it. I'm still grieving that. So I'm just sharing all of this because, I don't know, it's my unique experience. And in my 20s, I learned about the Atkins diet was really popular. So I learned about low carb eating, which for me and my family history with all the diabetes, I actually do have a harder time eating carbs. As a kid, it was very, very difficult for me because I can't eat cereal. If I eat cereal, like 3 hours later, I am so hungry, I'm shaking. And this has always been like this. So when I was a kid, I would eat cereal for breakfast because that's what I had. And I would go to school, and by mid-morning, I would be literally sick. If you've ever had that drop blood sugar feeling, you totally know what I'm talking about. And I just thought that was normal. I thought that's how things were. Like, I thought that's how people felt. I didn't connect that for me, it's hard to eat a lot of high carbs that are easily digestible without a lot of protein, because it will make me sick, or shaky, low blood sugar. So that was my experience. I now, like, I love oatmeal. I still have a harder time with cereal, but I love oatmeal, but I have to put peanut butter and pumpkin seeds and lots of protein in it in order for it to not make me a shaky mess a few hours later. So in my 20s, I learned about the Atkins diet, and thus I started my long 25-year struggle with going between healthy eating, which for me for a lot of years meant low carb, and then blowing it, and then eating whatever I wanted, and then getting back on it, and then feeling guilty because I felt that the low carb diet was really problematic because it left out food groups and nutritious food groups. I've always had a problem with approaches that get rid of whole food groups, but also that's the only thing that's ever worked for me to lose weight. But I'm learning about that. I want to say I don't think that's the only way for me to lose weight, and I actually lied just now. In my experience, when I have gone extreme low carb, I have had really good results the first few weeks, which, as you may or may not know, and as I'm learning, it really is more about water water loss versus fat loss, and it feels good, but how good is it in the long term? Who knows? I mean, I think researchers know. I do not know. So I have been struggling with this. Should I eat low carb? Should I eat vegan? Should I do this? Should I do that? For literally years. And my weight, I was already overweight. Like, I'm really hesitant about using that phrase. I was already overweight. I weighed more than I wanted to when I was, 20. And since then, I've probably put on a good 80 pounds. So that has been my life. There's been a few spots over the last few years in particular, and then this was compounded by the fact that for a lot of my adult life, I drank too much. I started drinking professionally in my early 20s, and I did not stop until last year. And I stopped drinking entirely. I don't drink at all, and I can talk about that more, but it was one of the best things I've ever done for me. So like I said, I have had times when I have lost weight from low carb. I have had times when I have lost weight. My husband and I lived on the road for a few years ago. We went and I'm location independent with what I do, and was making enough that he didn't need to work. He's a little bit more old school. He's not going to start an online business. So we went out and lived on the road in a van, and it was super fun, and we want to do more of that. But a lot of van life people in general, van life is kind of the hashtag that's used on Instagram and YouTube a lot. A lot of van life people are vegan. I think in part because that style of life is very minimalistic, and it appeals to a certain kind of person who generally is also interested in veganism. We started eating a lot more vegan. My husband has a hard time with that. He's a meat eater for sure. I actually, like I said, I am sort of naturally tend towards veganism. Most meat is not something that I want to eat, and I have to force myself to eat it a lot of times. And I've never, even since I was a kid, been able to consume dairy that much. The more liquid dairy, like the more it gets solid, the easier it is for me. So like cow milk cheese and cow milk yogurt or cottage cheese, not a huge problem for me, and I will eat it, although I do prefer plant-based yogurts over cow milk yogurts, except for Noosa. Man, I love Noosa yogurt. We got into this rhythm of eating vegan on the road. I also have always been, I've always felt that if I track things, I do better. And I knew this about myself, and then I used to work, and I still work with authors, and I worked for an agency. One of the clients was Gretchen Rubin, who's a really well-known writer in the kind of self-help world. And Gretchen talks a lot about how some people need to abstain from things and track, and some people need to not do that. That for some people, the tracking and structure helps them be successful, but for some people, it like goes into toxic thinking really fast. And I always thought, oh, I'm the person who needs to track. I am rethinking that based on what I've been learning about the intuitive eating principles, but that's where I've been. So I weigh every day. I am all about like my fitness, I can't think of the name of the app. My Fitness Pal, the one that everybody uses to count calories. I've joined Weight Watchers, which is super tracking, although really I like Weight Watchers because the community element is actually really nice, although no, I'm also seeing it's very toxic for me. So mostly I've only lost weight when I've gone extreme low carb, with the exception of when we were on the road and started eating vegan. I wasn't even thinking about losing weight. I wasn't tracking, I wasn't weighing, I wasn't anything. And I stopped in a Publix grocery stores usually have scales that you can just step on right in the front. And we were down in Florida where there's a lot of Publix, and I weighed myself and I'd lost like 20 pounds and I didn't even realize it. So obviously just eating healthy whenever I want does work for me, but it was hard to recreate the circumstances I had on the road once I settled back into real life. And I do want to say there's this other thing, which I had all these, what I felt were false starts. I don't know if that's the right word, over the years where I'd be like, I'm going to get super healthy now. And I drank a lot. Like towards the end, I was a good 2 to 3 bottles of wine drinker most nights. That is, I think a bottle of wine has something like 1,000 calories. I used to know, I don't know anymore. So I was adding on thousands of calories every night from drinking, and I wasn't doing anything because I'd start drinking, at happy hour, which got earlier and earlier in the day. And I know some people will drink and go do active things. I'm not one of those people. I prefer sitting at the bar with friends and chatting. So I thought when I stopped drinking last year that I would magically lose all this weight. And I did lose weight. And it wasn't really to do with my drinking. It was more, I got kind of focused on eating more healthy, and I lost about 20 pounds. I lost about 30 pounds probably. And then I gained it back. And then I lost it. And then I gained it back. And I've been doing that for 2 years. And this is something I think about a lot. I get really stuck in this, how should I be healthy and successful? It's that and successful that is a problem. And for me. And I would go to extremes. I would decide, well, I think that the answer for me is extreme low carb. Although I was always low carb in the sense that I ate a lot, whatever vegetables. I stayed away from pasta and white potatoes, but sweet potatoes I was a little bit okay with. I never felt that great about limiting vegetables or fruit. Eating bananas did not make me gain weight. It's questionable what made me gain weight, or even if that matters. That's what I'm learning as I've been learning more about intuitive eating principles. I just have been on this hamster wheel for the last few years of 1 week I'm going to do very strict meal planning, stay on a structure. 1 week vegan, 1 week low carb, 1 week whatever I want to eat. Actually, lots of weeks, whatever I want to eat, because I get overwhelmed by creating all this structure and I give up, and then I keep having the last meal. Like, oh, I screwed up for today, so I'm just going to eat whatever I want, and then I'll start over tomorrow. And I never got to tomorrow. Incidentally, that thinking kept me drinking for 20 years longer than I really should have been drinking. So that's where I've been. And this is a little bit exacerbated because I am a planner. If I don't plan out meals, we waste a lot of money on food. And Jeff and I, my husband's name is Jeff, we don't eat the same food. We don't like the same food. He wants a lot of variety. I'll eat the same thing every day, which, side note, if you're into human design like I am interested in the variables and the best way for us to eat according to our design. Mine is closed taste, I believe it is. It's the one where I'm kind of the closest to a hunter-gatherer. I need to eat lots of local fresh food according to the human design concepts. And if you don't know what human design is, I'll put a link down in the comments. You can look it up, find your chart, learn about it, ask me questions. So I've been just really playing with this. So I'm almost done getting my makeup on now. So we're going to be done talking in just a minute. And I said this would be a long multi-phase, this is a long thing. So this is more my history. Where I am now is I have been aware of intuitive eating, but my concept of it was that you should eat when you're hungry and not put any limits on yourself and let your body guide you. And I had some issues with that. Here are my issues. Number one, my experience has been that if my body guides me, I will eat Ben & Jerry's ice cream all the time. So I was like, what's the point of even starting? Intuitive eating is, in my head, I thought it was for people who were into wellness, but did not have a complicated relationship with food that had led to obesity. I'm realizing that I had a lot of really flawed thinking. In fact, I'm realizing I thought with all of this stuff, I don't have a lot of trauma around I didn't think I had a lot of trauma around the diet world. I didn't have a mom pressuring me to follow a diet. In fact, it's my mom and I probably have a lot of the same habits and definitely the same chemistry. I have a fairly solid body, positive. I feel good about how I look. I will pick on things for sure. Everybody does, but I have, good lips, big boobs. You know, it's just like I haven't had those issues. So I thought I was all cool with the, you know, I don't have any issues. I don't have any food issues. I just eat because I like to eat. That was my thing. I just like the taste of food. That is why I eat. I don't have any emotional eating issues. I'm hesitant to really get into a lot of what I've been learning about intuitive eating because I don't want to misrepresent the concepts and I don't really know much about it. I'm just learning about it. But one thing that has struck me is that I thought intuitive eating was all about kind of go with your flow. So my problem number one is what I said, like my flow is Ben and Jerry's. And number two, after a lifetime of going through these weird binges, if you've ever started low carb, like especially old school Atkins low carb, you get over the hump of going low carb by eating a lot of cheese and meat for days. It's like, it's so gross, but it's very, like, you learn to stuff yourself to get rid of the cravings. I do have this really complicated issue with food that I didn't recognize. The other problem I had with intuitive eating is that, or the conception, it's not a problem. It's something I missed. It's something I had no idea about. It's not just about eating when your body tells you to eat. It's about not seeing any food as good or bad, as making all foods just neutral. You eat them when you're ready to eat them, and you don't eat them if you don't want them. And if you follow this, then you can get to a place where you can have junk food in the house. At least this is according to the kind of tenets of the intuitive eating movement, which there's a book, I'll link it below. I haven't read it. I seriously, I'm learning everything from Abby, the YouTube channel. She really is great. You should check her out. But I just have realized that I have an incredibly toxic relationship with food in the sense that I villainize foods terribly, just terribly. Like, this is good, this isn't good. And if it's a bad food, I will still eat it, but it will trigger that, well, I shouldn't even be eating this, so I'm going to eat as much as I can because I already blew it for the day, kind of thinking. So I'm really excited to learn about this stuff. There's a lot more I want to talk about because I have a history of blogging in the sewing world and posting pictures of myself online, like full body pictures. And I started this a long time ago, the blog, and I still get, and I haven't really blogged on this subject in a long time, but people still will send me emails like out of the blue, and it always surprises the hell out of me about how they've been following me for 10 years and they find it inspirational because I put pictures of myself out there, and I am a size 18 to 20 to 22, depending on what's going on and what I'm wearing. And people tell me that they find it inspiring to see somebody their size online. Now, it has changed so much with Instagram, especially really becoming big, because I think the girls these days are growing up in such a more, in some ways, healthy space. I know there's all this talk about online and comparisonitis, and I do agree the filters on Instagram are insane. But when I was growing up, the only people I saw my age were either classmates or they were on TV. So like Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy and all the people on the original Melrose Place and 90210, like that was my frame of reference. And I did not look like those girls. And there was no representation of people that looked like me. And even when I started blogging, it was, you know, late aughts, like 2007, 2008 is probably when I started my blog. There still wasn't a lot of representation. Facebook started in 2008. So like I've just been, like the rest of Gen X, we're really in this transitional space. And while I do think that the rise of social media can be extremely problematic, I also think that it's nice for young people to be able to find their space and find people like them online, especially if, like me, they grew up in a small town where it was very alienating for me because there was nobody like me. I felt very alone. So anyway, the point I wanted to make today is give you a little bit of my history and kind of talk about how important I think it is to, for me at least, to really open up my mind, stop thinking, oh, I don't have any problems, and realize I do. Like, I think we all have probably some toxic ideas about food that that we don't even realize are toxic. And then once you realize it, you see it everywhere, right? Like once you're like, oh yeah, that's an issue. And then I can see so much of what I do with this putting foods into the bad camp and then using it as like a guilty treat that triggers my last meal kind of thinking. So I am going to link below to the Abby's station. In particular, she has a playlist on intuitive eating that's super great as a primer. I'll link to the book. And I'll link to Human Design, which I know I brought that out of nowhere, and you're probably like, what the heck is she talking about? But it's really interesting stuff. I'm going to keep talking about this because it's a journey and I'm figuring it out. And there's a lot of related stuff going back to my blogging and putting pictures of myself out there. I have a lot of friends with and follow a lot of people who are in the body positivity movement and the health at any size or HAZE movement. And I have problems with that. So I am going to put my lipstick on now. I'm done getting ready for the day. I am going to a little mission to Whole Foods to stock up on some healthy foods. It's Sunday, so I can go a little, the Whole Foods is an hour away from me in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I'm going to head over there and I will talk to you guys soon.